In a city where power is currency and secrets are weapons, Harper Lane has dedicated her life to one mission: exposing the corruption that tore her family apart. For years, she's fought in the shadows, gathering evidence against Malcolm Cole, the mastermind behind an empire built on fear and deception. But when she finally gets close enough to bring him down, she receives a chilling warning. There's a traitor in your ranks. Suddenly, the battlefield shifts. The people Harper trusted most become suspects. A carefully laid plan unravels into chaos, and every step forward is shadowed by betrayal and danger. As Harper closes in on Cole, she must make impossible choices, risk everything to expose the truth, or lose herself to the very darkness she's trying to defeat. What happens when the fight for justice forces you to confront your deepest fears? Who do you trust when the enemy could be standing right beside you? The hum of the city was a constant reminder that life moved on, indifferent to the battles fought beneath its towering skyline. Harper Lane sat alone in her sleek black car, the rumble of the engine matching the steady beat of her heart. The brown envelope on the seat beside her felt heavier than it should have been, as though the weight of the entire city's secrets rested inside. Her mind drifted back to the night before, to the anonymous email that changed everything. Cole's network has a weak point. Trust no one, even in your own circle. That warning had stuck with her like a splinter beneath her skin. She had spent years gathering evidence against Malcolm Cole, a mastermind behind a sprawling corruption empire. But if there was a traitor within her ranks, the plan could crumble before it even began. Harper's smartwatch vibrated, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her closest ally, Logan Pierce. "We're in position. Are you ready?" She typed back quickly. "Ready as I'll ever be." The warehouse ahead loomed like a dark sentinel against the night sky. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for. She had set the perfect trap for Blake Harrison, Cole's enforcer, by leaking false intel about a meeting at the docks. She hoped his greed would lure him here. Harper tightened her grip on the steering wheel as headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A black SUV pulled up beside her, and out stepped Blake Harrison himself, dressed in his usual smirk and arrogance. "Well, well," Blake drawled as he approached. "Didn't expect you to be so eager to hand me that envelope, Harper." Harper stepped out, calm but alert. "You're making a mistake, Blake." Blake's smirk deepened as he pulled out his phone. "The only mistake was you thinking you could outsmart Cole. Hand it over." But before Blake could make another move, Harper pressed a button on her watch. The headlights of her car flared to life, blinding Blake for a crucial second. In that instant, two more cars roared onto the scene, Logan and their team. Blake stumbled back, rage flashing across his face. "You set me up." "No, Blake." Harper's voice was cold as steel. "You set yourself up." Logan stepped forward, his gun raised. "Hands where I can see them." But instead of surrendering, Blake laughed, a chilling sound in the quiet night. "You think this end with me?" He locked eyes with Harper. "You have no idea who you're really dealing with." Harper felt a chill creep down her spine. Then Blake said something that would haunt her long after that night. "There's a traitor in your ranks, Harper, and you'll never see them coming." Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay composed. "We'll see about that." As Blake was handcuffed and taken away, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. As the team cleared the scene, Logan's reassuring smile was the only thing that kept Harper grounded. But as they drove back to headquarters, the echo of Blake's warning reverberated in her mind. "A traitor in your ranks." And Harper knew, with a sickening certainty, that the most dangerous game was only just beginning. The clock on the dashboard blinked 2:17 a.m. as Harper Lane's car pulled into the underground parking garage. The air was thick with exhaust fumes and silence. Logan Pierce parked beside her, stepping out with a weary but determined expression. "You did great tonight," Logan said, running a hand through his short blonde hair. His steady demeanor was always a source of comfort. Blake didn't see it coming. Harper managed a small smile, but her mind was miles away. "There's a traitor in your ranks." Blake's words felt like a splinter lodged in her thoughts, small but impossible to ignore. "Thanks," Harper replied, closing her car door. "But something doesn't feel right." Logan tilted his head. Blake was bluffing. Guys like him always play mind games when they're cornered. Harper's eyes locked on his. Or he wasn't bluffing. A heavy pause settled between them. Logan opened his mouth as if to say something reassuring, but the ding of the elevator arriving cut him off. The doors slid open, and they stepped inside, Harper pressing the button for the 10th floor. The dimly lit room was empty except for two figures: Avery Dawson, the team's sharp-eyed tech expert, and Theo Bennett, the former FBI agent with a perpetual scowl. Avery was typing furiously at her laptop, her neon blue hair glowing under the light of her screen. "The data Blake was carrying has been decrypted," she said, without looking up. "Financial statements, transaction logs, it's all here." Theo leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. His dark eyes scanned Harper as she entered. "You look like hell," he said bluntly. Harper raised a brow. "Thanks, Theo. Always the charmer." Theo shrugged. "What's next? We've got Blake. Do we go after Cole directly?" Harper shook her head. "Not yet. We need to be sure. There's a weak point in Cole's network, and I don't want to move until we've exposed it. But—" She hesitated. "Blake said there's a traitor among us." Avery finally looked up, her fingers pausing mid-keystroke. "You think he was serious?" Theo's expression darkened. "We've been in this too long to ignore something like that." Logan stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Let's not turn on each other just because Blake threw a grenade. That's exactly what Cole wants." But Harper couldn't ignore the weight of the moment. She knew better than anyone how trust could fracture under pressure. 1 year ago, Harper sat at her father's bedside in a sterile hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of the machines, the only sound. Jack Lane had been a legend, an honest cop in a corrupt city, but he had paid the price. "They'll try to break you," Jack whispered, his voice weak. "Not from the outside, but from within." His hand tightened around hers. "Promise me, when the time comes, you'll know who to trust." Harper blinked away the memory as the elevator doors slid open again, breaking the spell. Theo's phone vibrated, and he glanced at the screen, his brows furrowing. "We've got a problem," he muttered. Avery's fingers flew back across her keyboard. The large monitor on the wall blinked to life, displaying security footage from outside their building. A black SUV was parked near the entrance, engine running, headlights off. "That's not one of ours," Avery muttered. Logan reached for his gun. "Stay here. I'll check it out." Harper grabbed his arm. "No, we're not splitting up. Not now." The elevator dinged again, but this time the doors didn't open. Avery's face paled. Someone just hacked the system. The lights flickered, and the team tensed. Theo moved toward the stairwell door, gun in hand. "We're sitting ducks in here." Suddenly, the emergency fire alarm blared, a deafening, disorienting sound. Harper's heart pounded as the room filled with flashing red lights. A figure emerged from the stairwell, a man dressed in black tactical gear, face obscured by a mask. He held up a small device, and the fire alarm abruptly stopped. "Get down!" Theo barked, raising his weapon, but the masked man didn't fire. Instead, he pulled off his mask, revealing a face Harper knew all too well. "Ethan?" Harper's voice was barely a whisper. Ethan Cross, their logistics specialist. He had been part of the team for years, loyal to a fault, or so she'd believed. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," Ethan said, hands raised. "But you need to hear me out." Logan's jaw clenched. "You broke into our base and expect us to believe you're innocent?" "Cole is already inside your system," Ethan said urgently. "If I didn't do this, none of you would have seen it coming." Harper stared into Ethan's eyes, searching for a lie, but all she saw was desperation. Avery's voice trembled as she spoke. "He's telling the truth." All eyes turned to her. "I just checked the logs. Someone breached our firewall an hour ago. If Ethan hadn't triggered a lockdown..." Harper swallowed hard. Trust no one. She had wanted to believe her team was unbreakable, but now the cracks were undeniable. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's more. I have proof. But if we don't move now, Cole will burn this place to the ground." Harper met his gaze and made a choice. "Then let's make sure we're the ones holding the match." As the team regrouped, the weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air. The question wasn't just whether Ethan was telling the truth, but whether Harper could trust herself to lead when shadows loomed so close. The room felt like it had shrunk, the weight of distrust pressing down on every shoulder. Harper Lane stood at the center, arms crossed, her gaze steady but tense. Ethan Cross, once their logistics specialist, now stood in front of her as a self-proclaimed informant. Around them, Logan Pierce, Theo Bennett, and Avery Dawson formed a wary circle, their eyes darting between Harper and Ethan, each thought tethered to one unspoken question. Is he telling the truth, or leading us into a trap? The monitor behind them flickered ominously as Avery's frantic keystrokes filled the silence. "I'm in," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "But it's bad. Whoever hacked us is good like government-level good. They're already deleting files." Harper's heart sank. Every piece of evidence they had built against Malcolm Cole could be wiped out in minutes. She turned to Ethan, her voice sharp. "You said you had proof. Show me." Ethan nodded and pulled a small flash drive from his jacket. "It's all here: transaction records, backdoor communication logs, names of Cole's inner circle." Logan's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because someone on the inside tipped Cole off. That's why I had to go dark." He took a breath. "Harper, there's a mole in this team." The room went deathly quiet. Even the hum of the monitor seemed to fade away. Theo was the first to break the silence. "You expect us to believe you when you're the one who just broke in here?" Ethan met his glare without flinching. "You've known me for years. I built our entire logistics network from the ground up. Do you really think I'd be dumb enough to betray you and walk back in here alone?" Theo's scowl deepened, but he didn't reply. Harper stepped between them, her hand raised. "Enough. We don't have time for this." She took the flash drive from Ethan and handed it to Avery. "Scan it for any trackers or malware. If this is clean, we use it." Avery hesitated for only a second before nodding. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she plugged in the drive. Okay, it's loading." The large monitor blinked, then displayed a flurry of files, names, dates, transaction records. Harper's breath caught in her chest. It was real. Ethan crossed his arms. "This is everything Cole didn't want you to see." He pointed to a folder labeled Project Ashfall. Logan's brow furrowed. "What's Ashfall?" Ethan's face darkened. "It's Cole's contingency plan. If we get too close to exposing him, he burns everything, including us." Harper's pulse quickened. "Burn everything? What does that mean?" Ethan locked eyes with her. "It means he's willing to take out anyone who stands in his way. If Ashfall is triggered, innocent lives will be caught in the crossfire." Avery let out a quiet curse. "The firewall's under attack again. They're trying to shut us out." Theo grabbed his gun. "Then we move. We can't sit here and wait to be picked off." Harper nodded. "Agreed. Avery, save what you can and send copies to the off-site servers. Logan, prep the cars. We're moving to our backup location." Logan paused, his blue eyes filled with concern. "Where are you going?" Harper's expression hardened. "To find out who the mole is." 30 minutes later, Harper's car sped through the city streets, the weight of the truth pressing down on her shoulders like an anvil. She wasn't heading to their backup location. She had someone else to confront someone who had slipped under the radar for far too long. The parking garage beneath an abandoned library was dimly lit and empty, save for one car, a sleek silver sedan. The driver leaned casually against the hood, his arms crossed. Harper stepped out, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Graham Beckett," she said coldly. Graham, a former intelligence analyst and longtime associate, greeted her with a slow smile. "Harper Lane, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Harper didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Cut the act. Cole knew about our operation. He knew where we'd be. That kind of intel doesn't come from guesses." Graham's smile didn't waver. "Are you accusing me of something?" Harper took a step closer, her voice low but lethal. "I'm not accusing, I'm confirming. The question is, are you going to tell me why, or do I have to drag it out of you?" For a brief moment, Graham's mask slipped. A flicker of guilt flashed across his face. But then he sighed, his shoulders sagging. "You were never supposed to be part of this," he muttered. Harper's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Graham's voice cracked as he spoke. "I was embedded in your team from the start. Cole paid me to keep tabs to sabotage you if you got too close. But—" he hesitated. "But things changed." Harper's anger flared. "Changed how?" Graham's gaze softened. "I saw what Cole was capable of. I saw what he did to people who got in his way, including Jack Lane." Harper's breath hitched. "You knew my father?" Graham nodded. Regret etched across his face. "He wasn't supposed to die. Cole gave the order and I didn't stop it." Harper clenched her fists. "You coward." Graham didn't deny it. "I deserve that." Harper took a step back, her mind racing. "Why tell me now?" Graham's eyes were filled with something she hadn't expected: fear. "Because Ashfall isn't just a plan, it's a death sentence. If Cole thinks I've outlived my usefulness, I'm next." Harper's gaze narrowed. "Then you'd better make yourself useful. Give me everything you know." Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted drive. "This has the names of every contact, every bribe, and every operation Cole's ever run." He handed it to Harper, his hand shaking. "I just want out." Harper took the drive, but didn't lower her guard. "You don't get to walk away clean, Graham. You'll testify." Graham nodded, defeated. "If it means taking Cole down, I'll do it." As Harper walked back to her car, the weight of her discovery settled over her like a storm cloud. Cole's empire was built on betrayal, fear, and death. And now, she had a piece of the puzzle that could bring it all crashing down. But the clock was ticking. Ashfall was in motion, and she knew that if she wasn't careful, everything and everyone she cared about would burn. As the silver sedan's taillights disappeared into the night, Harper's phone buzzed. A message from Logan. "We're in position. What's your status?" Harper's fingers hovered over the screen. Her next move would determine everything. The city skyline stretched like a jagged shadow against the night sky as Harper Lane drove toward the backup location. The encrypted drive Graham Beckett had given her sat on the passenger seat, glowing faintly under the dashboard light. Her mind churned with everything she'd just learned. Graham had been embedded in her team from the start, planted by Malcolm Cole. But now, the betrayer had become a reluctant ally. The headlights of an oncoming car snapped her out of her thoughts. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her pulse steadying. Her phone buzzed in the console. It was Logan Pierce. She hesitated for a second before answering. "Harper, where the hell are you?" Logan's voice was taut with concern. "You were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago." "I needed answers," Harper replied, her voice calm but resolute. Logan exhaled sharply. "Please tell me you didn't go after Beckett alone." "I got what we needed," she said, glancing at the drive. "Cole's entire network, every contact, every transaction, it's all here." There was a pause. "You trusted him?" Logan asked, his voice low. "I didn't have a choice," Harper admitted. "Harper, Logan's voice softened, losing its edge. I get it. But if Beckett's telling the truth, we're already running out of time. I know, Harper said quietly. I'm almost there. Harper pulled into a nondescript parking lot at the edge of the city. The safe house was an old warehouse repurposed with reinforced walls and minimal windows, chosen precisely for its lack of visibility. A single dim light buzzed over the entrance. Logan and Avery met her at the door. Logan's jaw was tight with frustration, but he let it go when he saw the exhaustion in Harper's eyes. Avery held up a tablet, scanning the encrypted drive. This thing is packed. I'm talking names, offshore accounts, secret communications. It's like Cole handed us his entire playbook. Graham said it's all real, Harper said as they walked inside. Theo Bennett was waiting by the security console, his arms crossed. He raised a brow as Harper entered. So, Beckett finally flipped? Harper nodded. He gave us everything, but we're not the only ones who know. Theo's face darkened. Cole's coming, isn't he? Harper met his gaze. Not just Cole, his entire inner circle. If Ashfall is activated, this whole city becomes collateral damage. Avery's fingers danced across her tablet screen. Then we hit back first. We use this data, expose every single one of them before they can make a move. Harper hesitated. We can't just leak it. We need confirmation it has to be airtight. If we're wrong about one name, Cole will twist it against us. Logan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. Then what's the plan? Harper looked at her team, the weight of the next decision settling on her shoulders. We divide and conquer. Logan, Theo, and I will handle surveillance on Cole's main headquarters. Avery, I need you here decrypting everything. Find any names connected to Project Ashfall. And Ethan. She paused as Ethan Cross entered the room, still an outsider in the eyes of the others. You're with me, Harper finished. Theo's expression hardened. You sure about that? Harper nodded. If we're going to stop Cole, we need to take some risks. Ethan's eyes flickered with something Harper hadn't seen in years, gratitude. The team split up, each car disappearing into the shadows of the city. Harper and Ethan drove in silence, the streetlights casting fleeting patterns across the windshield. Ethan finally broke the silence. You didn't have to trust me. Harper kept her eyes on the road. No, I didn't. But you didn't have to come back either. Ethan smiled faintly. Guess we're both reckless. They pulled up a block away from a high-rise downtown, the crown jewel of Cole's empire. The top floors were an impenetrable fortress of tinted glass and steel. But Harper knew the weaknesses in any fortress lay in the people who built it. Ethan reached into the glove compartment and handed Harper an earpiece. We tap into their comms. If anyone's moving inside, we'll hear it. Harper slipped the earpiece in. What about Cole? Ethan's jaw tightened. If he's there, he won't be alone. Harper nodded. Good. Neither are we. They moved quickly, weaving through service entrances and bypassing security checkpoints. Harper's pulse remained steady, though her senses were on high alert. Ethan led the way, his familiarity with the building's schematics guiding their path. They reached an observation room overlooking the main conference hall. A meeting was already in progress. Harper's breath caught when she saw him, Malcolm Cole himself, seated at the head of the table, like a king addressing his court. Cole's voice filtered through their earpieces. The situation is contained. By morning, no one will even remember the name Harper Lane. Harper's fingers curled into fists. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. We've got him. Not yet, Harper replied, her eyes narrowing. We need more. Suddenly a voice cut through their comms, a familiar one. Harper. Harper froze. Logan? Logan's voice was strained, like he was out of breath. We've got a problem. I think Theo... The line went dead. Harper's heart lurched. Logan! Logan! Ethan's face paled. What just happened? Harper's mind raced. Theo, what had he been about to say? The door behind them burst open, and Theo stood there, gun raised. Harper's blood ran cold. Theo? Theo's face was devoid of emotion. You should have stayed out of this, Harper. Harper slowly raised her hands. You're working for Cole. Theo's silence was answer enough. Ethan stepped forward. Theo, whatever he promised you, it's not worth it. Theo's expression hardened. You think this is about money? Cole didn't just offer me a way out, he offered me justice. For the things we've lost. Harper's voice was steady but soft. And how many innocent people will have to pay for that justice, Theo? For a moment, the mask cracked. Theo's eyes wavered. Then, footsteps echoed down the hall. More guards. We're out of time, Ethan whispered. Harper met Theo's gaze. You can still choose. The guards turned the corner, and everything happened in a blur. Theo hesitated just long enough for Harper to move. She knocked the gun from his hand and grabbed his wrist, twisting him to the floor. Go! She shouted at Ethan as the guards closed in. Ethan hesitated, then ran toward the exit as Harper held Theo down. The guards swarmed the room, but Harper's gaze was locked on Theo's. You chose wrong, she whispered. Theo's eyes filled with something between regret and resignation as the guards closed in. The cold floor of the observation room pressed against Harper Lane's back as two guards grabbed her arms and forced her to stand. The metallic taste of adrenaline coated her tongue, but her eyes never left Theo Bennett's face. He stood motionless, hands at his sides, as if frozen in the aftermath of his betrayal. You should have listened, Theo muttered, his voice hoarse. Harper's heart ached at the sound of it. And you should have remembered what we were fighting for. The guards shoved her toward the hallway as more men joined them, their radios crackling with instructions. Bring her to the main room, one of them barked. Theo followed behind, his steps slow and deliberate. Harper could feel the weight of his regret, but it wasn't enough. Not now. Malcolm Cole's headquarters was a stark contrast to the sterile corridors. The conference room gleamed with glass walls and sleek black marble floors. Cole sat at the head of the massive oval table, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile a serpent's grin. Well, this is unexpected, Cole drawled as Harper was led inside. Harper Lane herself, caught in the lion's den. The guards forced Harper into a chair at the center of the room. She raised her chin defiantly, meeting Cole's gaze with unwavering resolve. Let me guess, Harper said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. This is the part where you gloat. Cole chuckled, slow and measured. Oh, Harper, I don't need to gloat. You walked right into my hands. Behind him, a massive monitor lit up with security footage clips of the break-in. Harper and Ethan moving through the building. Cole tapped the screen. You and your team, always so predictable. Harper's pulse quickened. Where was Ethan? Had he made it out? Cole's eyes narrowed. And poor Logan. I'm sure you're wondering what happened to him. Harper's breath caught. Where is he? Cole leaned back, steepling his fingers. Alive for now, but he's in less comfortable accommodations. Harper clenched her fists, her composure cracking for just a second. Cole's smirk deepened. See, that's the thing about betrayal. It always stings more when it's someone close. He glanced at Theo, who stood silently near the door. Harper forced herself to speak. You turned him against us. Cole's gaze flicked to Theo. Turned? No, Harper. Theo came willingly. And why wouldn't he? Justice isn't handed out. It's taken. Theo's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. Cole gestured toward the large monitor again. A series of documents appeared labeled Project Ashfall. Let's give you a history lesson, Cole began. Ashfall was designed to ensure that if anyone threatened my empire, they wouldn't just lose the fight, they'd lose everything. Their reputation, their friends, their lives, a purge so complete no one would even remember their names. Harper's blood ran cold. You're insane. Cole laughed a low, chilling sound. Insane? No, Harper. I'm a realist. You've seen how the world works. People don't respect ideals, they respect power. He stood and walked around the table, leaning in close. His breath was hot against Harper's ear. And you? You're just another idealist who thought you could change the system. Harper turned her head slightly, her voice a whisper of steel. No, I'm the one who's going to destroy yours. The monitor behind Cole suddenly flickered, static crackling across the screen. Cole frowned, turning toward it. A voice filled the room, clear, familiar, and bold. This is Ethan Cross, broadcasting live. Harper's heart leaped. He made it. The footage changed to a live stream from outside the building. Ethan's face appeared, resolute. To everyone watching, this is the truth about Malcolm Cole. The screen split, showing the encrypted files' names, payments, secret operations all playing out in real time. Ethan had hijacked Cole's own security feed and was broadcasting it to the public. Cole's calm demeanor shattered. "Cut it off!" he roared to his tech team. Harper seized the distraction, twisting her arms free from the guard's grip. She spun, using the chair as a weapon, knocking one of them to the ground. The other reached for his radio, but Harper drove her elbow into his jaw. Theo took a step forward, his face pale but conflicted. "Don't," Harper warned, breathless but steady. Theo's hands trembled as he raised his gun. "I have to." "No," Harper said, locking eyes with him. "You don't." The tension stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. In the background, Cole's voice was a storm of fury as he shouted orders at his men. Guards were scrambling, but the building's systems were compromised, elevators frozen, security doors locked. Ethan's broadcast continued. "This is who Malcolm Cole really is, and this is the price of his power." Theo's gun remained raised. Harper took a cautious step forward. "You said you wanted justice, but this isn't it. Cole doesn't care about you. He only uses people." Theo's breathing was ragged. "You don't understand." "I do," Harper whispered. "I've been there. I've wanted to burn it all down too, but this isn't the way." Theo's eyes glistened with something raw guilt, pain, regret. A gunshot rang out, but not from Theo's weapon. One of Cole's guards had fired. Harper dropped to the floor as the bullet struck the wall behind her. Theo turned and fired back, hitting the guard squarely in the chest. Harper stared in shock as Theo dropped his weapon. "I'm done," Theo said quietly. Ethan's voice echoed once more through the room. "The files have been sent to every major news outlet. There's nowhere left for Cole to hide." Cole's expression twisted into something monstrous. "You think this is over?" Harper took a slow step forward. "It's over, Cole." The doors burst open as Logan and a team of federal agents stormed in, guns raised. Cole's men dropped their weapons immediately. Harper ran to Logan, who was battered but alive. He gave her a weak smile. "Told you I'd catch up." Harper smiled through the adrenaline coursing through her. "You're late." Cole was dragged away, still shouting threats, but Harper didn't hear them. For the first time in years, the noise of corruption was drowned out by something stronger, the truth. As the agents secured the building, Harper and her team stood together in silence, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The broadcast had done its job. Cole's empire had crumbled in real time. But Harper knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a long road toward rebuilding what Cole had broken. The hum of activity at the headquarters of the Federal Bureau crackled like static in Harper Lane's ears. After Malcolm Cole had been taken into custody, the wheels of justice had immediately begun to turn. Agents worked tirelessly to sort through the mountain of evidence Ethan Cross had broadcast. Screens in every room flashed images of financial logs, offshore accounts, and internal communications, each thread unraveling Cole's sprawling network. But Harper wasn't celebrating. She stood alone in a small interrogation room, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights matching the tension tightening her chest. Across from her sat Theo Bennett, his hands cuffed to the metal table. The man who had betrayed her was now silent, his eyes heavy with unspoken regret. "You could have told me," Harper said finally, her voice low but sharp. Theo didn't look up. "Would it have changed anything?" "Yes," she snapped. "You made yourself a pawn in his game. For what? Justice?" Theo's lips twitched, a bitter smile crossing his face. "You don't get it, Harper. I didn't join Cole for justice. I joined him because I thought he could make the pain stop." Harper leaned back, her arms crossed. "What pain, Theo? What did he promise you?" Theo's voice cracked. "I lost everything. My wife, my son, all because of the corruption Cole claimed he could control. He told me if I worked with him, I could make sure no one else had to suffer like I did." He looked up, his eyes hollow. "But I became the thing I hated most." Harper exhaled slowly. "And now, you're here. Was it worth it?" Theo didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the command center, Logan Pierce and Avery Dawson sifted through the fallout of Cole's empire. Ethan Cross leaned against a desk, his arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. "They're all panicking," Avery said, scrolling through live news feeds. "Cole's allies are jumping ship faster than rats on a sinking boat." Logan crossed his arms. "That's good. But it also means they're desperate. Desperate people make dangerous moves." Ethan nodded. "And Cole still has leverage. Even behind bars, he knows enough to ruin people. He's not done yet." Logan glanced at Harper as she entered the room, her expression grim. "How's Theo?" Harper shook her head. "Broken, but he's willing to testify." Ethan straightened. "Testify? Against Cole?" "He knows everything," Harper said. "Every backdoor deal, every bribe. If we can get his testimony on record, it'll be the nail in Cole's coffin." Avery frowned. "There's a problem with that. Cole's network isn't just going to let Theo talk. If he testifies, he's as good as dead." Logan turned to Harper. "So, what's the plan?" Harper's jaw tightened. "We protect him, no matter what it takes." Hours later, Harper and her team transported Theo to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. The convoy consisted of 2 black SUVs, each loaded with agents and surveillance equipment. Harper sat in the back seat of the lead vehicle, her eyes scanning the empty road ahead. "You think Cole knows we've got him?" Logan asked from the driver's seat. Harper nodded. "If he doesn't already, he will soon." The radio crackled. "Approaching checkpoint," came the voice of an agent in the second SUV. But just as the words were spoken, Harper's stomach dropped. Headlights appeared in the distance, 2 sets, then 3, then 4. "Roadblock!" Logan shouted, slamming the brakes. The SUVs skidded to a halt as black sedans swarmed the road. Armed men poured out, their weapons trained on the convoy. Harper drew her gun, adrenaline surging through her veins. "They're here for Theo," she said, her voice cold. "Not on my watch," Logan growled, grabbing his weapon. The lead sedan's door opened, and a tall man stepped out, his face shadowed by the car's headlights. Harper recognized him instantly. Cole's lieutenant, Victor Harlan, a man known for his ruthlessness and precision. "Give us Bennett," Harlan called out, his voice echoing across the empty road. "And you walk away." Harper stepped out of the SUV, her gun raised. "Not a chance," Harlan smirked. "Have it your way." The first gunshot cracked through the night, and chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the air as Harper's team scrambled for cover. Logan fired from behind the SUV, picking off 2 of Harlan's men, while Avery coordinated reinforcements through the radio. Ethan pulled Theo from the second SUV, shielding him as they ducked behind a concrete barrier. "We have to move!" Ethan shouted over the gunfire. Harper spotted an opening. "Logan, cover us!" Logan nodded, unleashing a volley of shots as Harper and Ethan guided Theo toward a nearby ditch. Harlan's men pressed forward, their firepower relentless. "We're pinned!" Harper shouted, frustration boiling in her chest. Ethan glanced at her, his face resolute. "Go, I'll hold them off." Harper froze. "Ethan, go!" he barked, pulling a smoke grenade from his vest. With a flick of his wrist, he threw the grenade, thick clouds of smoke enveloping the battlefield. Harper grabbed Theo's arm and bolted, her heart pounding as the sound of gunfire faded behind her. Harper and Theo reached a clearing. Just as the reinforcements arrived, 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt, and heavily armed agents poured out. But Harper's relief was short-lived. Ethan emerged from the smoke, blood staining his shoulder, his steps uneven. Logan sprinted to his side, catching him before he collapsed. "You idiot," Logan muttered, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan managed a weak grin. Someone had to be the distraction. As medics rushed to stabilize Ethan, Harper turned to Theo. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but there was a fire in his eyes Harper hadn't seen before. "I'll testify," Theo said, his voice steady. "Whatever it takes, I'll help you bring him down." Harper nodded, her resolve hardening. "Good, because this isn't over." Back at the safe house, Harper stared out the window, her thoughts tangled with the events of the night. Cole's reach was deeper than she'd imagined, but so was her team's resilience. Logan entered, his expression grim. "Ethan's stable. He'll be fine." Harper exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. "But you know Cole won't stop," Logan continued. "He'll come after Theo, after us, with everything he has." Harper turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Let him. We're ready." As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Harper felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight wasn't just for Theo's testimony, it was for everyone who had suffered under Cole's shadow. And now, as the clock ticked closer to the trial, Harper knew the final battle was about to begin. The courtroom buzzed with subdued murmurs, an undercurrent of tension crackling through the air. Reporters lined the back rows, their notebooks and cameras poised for the trial of the decade. The case of United States versus Malcolm Cole had captivated the nation, a showdown between justice and corruption, with Harper Lane at the center of it all. Harper sat at the prosecution's table, her posture steady despite the nerves coiling in her chest. Logan Pierce sat beside her, his sharp gaze scanning the room. On the opposite side, Malcolm Cole exuded calm arrogance, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit as if he were presiding over the proceedings, rather than facing them. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent as everyone rose. "You may be seated," Judge Hamilton said, his voice steady but firm. Harper inhaled slowly as the first gavel strike echoed through the room. This was it. The lead prosecutor, Erin Walker, stepped forward. She was calm and methodical, a veteran attorney known for dismantling even the most airtight defenses. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice resonating across the room. "This is not just a trial of one man's guilt. It is a trial of how far greed, power, and corruption can reach when no one dares to challenge it." She gestured toward Cole. "The evidence you will see today will paint a picture of a man who thrived off manipulation, who silenced dissent, and who amassed his fortune through fear." Cole leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Erin's gaze hardened. "But what you'll also see today is something more powerful: the truth. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface." As Erin returned to the table, Harper whispered, "Nailed it." Logan gave a curt nod. "She always does." Cole's defense attorney, Vincent Grayson, rose to deliver his statement. He was slick, charismatic, and infamously ruthless. His job wasn't to prove Cole's innocence, it was to sow enough doubt to destabilize the prosecution's case. "Power is not a crime," Grayson began smoothly. "We live in a world where powerful men are envied and scrutinized. My client, Malcolm Cole, has been the victim of a coordinated smear campaign by people who couldn't achieve his success." He paced before the jury. You will see evidence, yes, but you will also see how easily evidence can be manipulated. His eyes flicked toward Harper and Logan, even by those who claim to be righteous. Grayson's words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The prosecution calls Theo Bennett to the stand, Aaron announced. The courtroom doors opened, and Theo entered. Gone was the man haunted by guilt and betrayal. In his place stood someone who had finally chosen a side. He raised his hand and took the oath, sitting down with a calm steadiness Harper hadn't seen before. Aaron approached the stand. "Mr. Bennett, could you state your former role within Malcolm Cole's organization?" Theo nodded. "I was an enforcer and a strategist. I handled operations and ensured Cole's commands were carried out." "And were these operations always legal?" Aaron asked. Theo's jaw clenched. "No, they involved bribery, intimidation, and, in some cases, violence." A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Aaron nodded solemnly. "And why did you choose to come forward?" Theo met her gaze, then turned toward the jury. "Because I lost sight of who I was. I thought working for Cole would stop the suffering. Instead, I became part of the problem." He inhaled deeply. "But now, I want to make it right." Harper felt a swell of pride mixed with sorrow. Theo's confession had come at great personal cost. Vincent Grayson approached the stand, a wolfish smile on his face. "Mr. Bennett," Grayson began, "you've admitted to being part of Cole's operations for years. So why should anyone here believe you're telling the truth now?" Theo's expression didn't waver. "Because I'm done lying." Grayson's smile widened. "How convenient. After all these years of silence, you suddenly grow a conscience?" He leaned in. "Or was it because you were caught?" Harper's hands tightened into fists beneath the table. Theo's voice remained steady. "I wasn't caught. I chose to walk away." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You say that, but isn't it true that you only came forward after Cole threatened to cut ties with you? Perhaps this is more about revenge than redemption." Theo stared at Grayson, unflinching. "No. This is about stopping a man who believes he's untouchable." Grayson faltered for a fraction of a second, a chink in his armor. Harper exchanged a glance with Logan. Grayson had overplayed his hand. As the trial continued, Aaron presented a slew of evidence: recordings of Cole's meetings, financial transactions tying him to bribes, and witness testimonies from small business owners who had been extorted. Each new piece chipped away at Cole's facade of invulnerability, but Harper couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. Cole was too calm. His empire was burning, yet he still smiled, as if holding a trump card no one else could see. During a brief recess, Harper pulled Aaron aside. "Something's wrong. Cole isn't just going to sit here and let this happen." Aaron's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Harper's gaze darkened. "He's planning something. I can feel it." Logan appeared beside them. "We've increased security, but I'll double-check everything." Harper nodded. "Good, because if I'm right, this trial could be the least of our worries." The court reconvened, and Aaron called her final witness, Ethan Cross. He was bandaged from the ambush, but steady as he took the stand. Aaron approached him. "Mr. Cross, could you describe your role in the exposure of Cole's operations?" Ethan recounted how he'd infiltrated Cole's system, found the encrypted files, and made the decision to broadcast the truth. The jury listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to belief. But just as Aaron finished her questions, the courtroom doors swung open. A man in a gray suit entered, holding a thick folder. He approached the judge and handed over a document. The judge's eyes scanned the pages, his face tightening. "What is this?" Aaron demanded. The judge cleared his throat. "It appears the defense has presented a last-minute motion. New evidence has been submitted." Harper's blood ran cold. "What new evidence?" Grayson rose, his grin triumphant. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce testimony that calls into question the very heart of the prosecution's case. The document he held contained a damning claim that Harper Lane and her team had fabricated evidence to frame Cole. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Erin shouted for order, but Harper's pulse thundered in her ears. Logan leaned close. "This is Cole's play. He's trying to flip the narrative." Harper's eyes blazed with fury. "Not this time." As the gavel pounded for order, Harper stood, her resolve like steel. The trial wasn't just about Cole anymore. It was about the truth itself. And Harper knew the final battle was about to begin. The courtroom was a war zone of voices. Reporters whispered furiously into their phones, the jury exchanged bewildered glances, and Judge Hamilton's gavel pounded for order like a drumbeat before a storm. At the prosecution's table, Harper Lane stood frozen for a heartbeat. New evidence? From where? Malcolm Cole's defense attorney, Vincent Grayson, wore a triumphant grin as he handed copies of the supposed testimony to the court clerk. Judge Hamilton's voice boomed over the chaos. "Order! This courtroom will maintain decorum, or I will clear it." The noise finally ebbed, leaving a tense, suffocating silence. Grayson took his time, pacing in front of the jury like a predator savoring its next move. "Ladies and gentlemen, this new testimony was provided by a whistleblower within the prosecution's own investigative team. It states that Harper Lane and her allies falsified documents to frame my client." Gasps rippled through the room. Harper's vision narrowed as her heart pounded. "A whistleblower?" Logan Pierce leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "They're lying. They have to be." Harper forced herself to focus. "The timing's too perfect. This is Cole's move. He's using someone from the inside." The judge adjusted his glasses, his expression grave. "Ms. Walker," he addressed Erin Walker, the lead prosecutor, "do you have a response to this submission?" Erin rose slowly, calm but furious. "Your Honor, this so-called testimony is a desperate last-minute attempt to derail this trial. The defense has had ample time to present their evidence. Why now?" Grayson's grin widened. "Because the truth has a way of emerging at just the right moment." He turned to the jury, his voice softening. "And isn't this trial about truth?" The judge gestured for the courtroom to remain silent. "Mr. Grayson, call your witness." Grayson adjusted his tie. "The defense calls Emily Lane." Time stopped. Harper's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. Logan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Your sister?" The courtroom door opened, and Emily Lane stepped inside. She looked pale, nervous, but determined. Her usual bright eyes were dull, weighed down by the gravity of the situation. She avoided Harper's gaze as she approached the witness stand. Harper's stomach twisted. "Why?" Emily raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. Grayson approached her, his demeanor gentle but manipulative. "Emily," Grayson began, "you've worked closely with your sister during her investigation of Malcolm Cole. Is that correct?" Emily nodded hesitantly. "Yes." Grayson took a step closer. "And did you ever witness any irregularities, any evidence that was altered?" Harper leaned forward, silently pleading for Emily to stay strong. Emily hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Yes." The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled furiously. Harper's world tilted. Logan grabbed her arm. "Harper, stay calm." But Harper's mind raced. Emily wouldn't betray me, not willingly. Judge Hamilton slammed the gavel. "Order. One more outburst, and I will hold the entire gallery in contempt." Grayson's face was a mask of sympathy as he pressed further. "Emily, can you describe what you saw?" Emily's hands trembled as she spoke. There was a set of financial records. Harper said they were incomplete, but later they looked different. She told me not to ask questions." Harper's heart shattered. They got to her. Erin rose, her movements deliberate as she approached Emily. "Emily, I understand this is difficult, but I need to ask, did anyone pressure you to give this testimony?" Emily's lip quivered, but she shook her head. Erin softened her voice. Emily, the truth matters. Were you ever contacted by anyone linked to Malcolm Cole? For a split second, fear flashed across Emily's face. Harper noticed it immediately. She's scared. Before Emily could answer, Grayson objected. Leading the witness, Your Honor. Judge Hamilton nodded. Sustained. Erin sighed but nodded to Emily. No further questions. As Emily stepped down, Harper watched her sister walk past, avoiding her gaze. During the next recess, Harper cornered Emily in the hallway. The walls felt like they were closing in as Harper fought to keep her voice steady. Emily, what's going on? Harper asked, searching her sister's face. Emily looked away, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't have a choice, Harper. Harper's chest tightened. Did they threaten you? Emily nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. They said if I didn't testify, they'd release photos, doctored photos, that would ruin everything I've worked for. They said they'd come after you. Harper's stomach twisted with rage. Emily, you should have told me. I was trying to protect you, Emily whispered. Harper pulled her sister into a tight hug. No more secrets. We're in this together. Emily nodded against her shoulder. Back in the courtroom, Harper whispered to Erin, we need to discredit the testimony before the jury loses faith. Erin's eyes glinted with determination. Leave that to me. As the court resumed, Erin called Avery Dawson to the stand. The tech expert adjusted her glasses as she was sworn in. Ms. Dawson, Erin began, as the lead analyst, can you confirm if the records in question were altered? Avery's voice was clear. No, they weren't. Every document was verified and time-stamped. If anything had been tampered with, I would have caught it. Grayson stood to object. Speculation? Erin shot him a glare. This is fact, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Overruled. Erin continued. And have you found any evidence that the defense may have manipulated key witnesses? Avery's lips thinned. Yes. Our investigation traced a series of anonymous payments tied to accounts controlled by Malcolm Cole's associates. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Erin turned toward the jury. The defense claims this trial is about truth, but the only truth is that Malcolm Cole will stop at nothing to undermine justice. He even used an innocent woman's fear to orchestrate false testimony. She pointed to Cole. This isn't about power. It's about control through fear. Cole's smirk finally faded. Harper glanced at the jury. Their expressions had shifted, doubt replaced by disgust. Judge Hamilton dismissed the court for the day, announcing that closing arguments would take place in the morning. Outside, Harper's team gathered. Logan clapped a hand on Harper's shoulder. We're winning. Harper's gaze was steady. We haven't won yet. Emily joined them, wiping her eyes. I'm so sorry, Harper. Harper hugged her again. We're going to make sure Cole never does this to anyone else. As the city lights flickered in the distance, Harper knew the final phase of the battle was near. The truth was out, but so was the danger. Cole wasn't defeated yet. The morning sun rose over the city like a quiet witness to the chaos brewing below. Outside the courthouse, a sea of reporters, activists, and onlookers had gathered, their faces tense with anticipation. Signs calling for justice mixed with murmurs of doubt after the previous day's shocking testimony. Harper Lane sat alone in a quiet room near the courtroom, her thoughts racing. Emily's coerced confession still haunted her, but it had also lit a fire Harper hadn't felt in a long time. Today the trial would come to an end, and Malcolm Cole's empire would either be shattered or he'd walk free. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Logan Pierce stepped inside, his usual calm tinged with urgency. You okay? He asked. Harper gave a small nod. I have to be. Logan crossed his arms. Grayson's going to come out swinging in his closing arguments. Harper's jaw tightened. Let him. We've got the truth, and now we have the proof. A few minutes later, Erin Walker entered the room, carrying a thick folder. "We just got confirmation," she said. "The anonymous payments to pressure Emily? They're tied directly to one of Cole's offshore accounts." Harper's pulse quickened. "Then we have him." Erin nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. "We're bringing it all into the light today." The courtroom filled quickly, every seat occupied, the atmosphere charged. Judge Hamilton took his seat and gave a nod to the prosecution. Erin Walker stood, calm and steady. She approached the jury box and let the silence stretch for a moment before she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the evidence, you've heard the testimonies, and you've witnessed firsthand the lengths to which Malcolm Cole is willing to go to maintain his empire." She pointed to the monitor, which displayed a damning timeline of events, payments, wire transfers, recorded threats, and testimonies from Theo Bennett and Ethan Cross. Cole didn't just break the law, he built an empire on fear, manipulation, and destruction. And when faced with the truth, he tried to twist it by using fear against innocent people, even Harper Lane's own sister. Erin's voice strengthened. "But the truth doesn't bend, and it doesn't break." She turned to the jury, her gaze unwavering. "This trial isn't just about one man. It's about who we choose to be as a society. Do we let men like Malcolm Cole rewrite the rules for their own gain? Or do we choose justice, no matter how difficult that path may be?" The jury hung on her every word. Erin returned to her seat, and Harper's heart swelled with pride. Vincent Grayson rose, adjusting his suit as he approached the jury. His steps were slow, deliberate, as though rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone smooth as silk, "what we've witnessed over the course of this trial is a story, a carefully constructed narrative designed to vilify a man who has built his success on ambition and ingenuity." He paced, gesturing to the jury. "Ambition isn't a crime, and the evidence presented, while dramatic, is full of gaps and inconsistencies." He paused for effect. "Think of Emily Lane's testimony. She admitted that records were altered." Harper stiffened but kept her face neutral. Grayson leaned in slightly. "If one piece of evidence is questionable, how can we trust the rest?" His words settled like poison, spreading doubt. Harper knew this was his strategy: discredit one part to weaken the whole. Grayson finished with a calm smile. "You don't have to like my client. You don't have to agree with him. But the law demands proof beyond reasonable doubt, and there simply isn't any." With that, he sat down, confident in the seeds he'd sown. The jury was excused to deliberate. The courtroom emptied slowly. Conversations hushed as people speculated about the outcome. Harper and her team gathered in a side room, the air thick with tension. Emily entered, her face pale but determined. Harper reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. "We've done everything we could." Emily nodded, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for all of this." Harper shook her head. "No apologies. We're here now, and we're stronger because of it." Logan crossed his arms. "You think they'll come back with a verdict today?" Ethan, still bandaged but sharp as ever, leaned against the wall. "If they're smart, they will. The evidence is too clear." Harper glanced at the clock. Each second felt like an eternity. 2 hours later, the jury filed back into the courtroom. The judge's expression was grave as he returned to his seat. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Harper's heart pounded in her chest as she rose with the rest of the room. She cast a glance toward Malcolm Cole, who still looked composed, but his eyes betrayed the faintest glimmer of unease. The jury foreperson stood, holding a small slip of paper. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" Judge Hamilton asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied. The room was so silent that Harper could hear her own heartbeat. The foreperson cleared her throat. "In the case of United States versus Malcolm Cole, on the charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, we find the defendant," a pause, "guilty." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled to capture the scene as gasps and murmurs filled the air. Cole's composure finally cracked, his smug grin disappeared, replaced by a cold fury as he clenched his fists. Judge Hamilton's gavel struck 3 times. "Order! I will have order!" Harper sat back, relief washing over her like a wave. Logan let out a breath he'd been holding, and Emily wiped away a tear. Aaron Walker gave Harper a small, victorious smile. As Cole was led away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Harper. His voice was low, venomous. "This isn't over." Harper's stare was like steel. "Yes, it is." Outside the courthouse, a wave of cheers erupted as the news spread. Supporters held signs declaring victory for justice, their chants echoing through the city streets. Harper stepped out into the sunlight, Emily at her side. Logan and the team followed, flanked by reporters asking endless questions. Harper stopped at the top of the steps, lifting her hand. "We did this together," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "This isn't just a victory over one man, it's a reminder that justice belongs to everyone." The crowd erupted into applause, and Harper felt a rare, quiet peace settle in her chest. As the crowd cheered, Harper's gaze shifted toward the horizon. The fight against corruption wasn't over, it never would be. But today, they had won. And as long as she drew breath, she would keep fighting for the truth. The city skyline was bathed in golden light as the sun began its slow ascent, pushing away the shadows of the night before. Harper Lane stood by her apartment's balcony, gazing out at the streets below, where people were still celebrating Malcolm Cole's conviction. The cheers had faded to distant echoes, but the sense of triumph remained thick in the air. The trial was over, but Harper knew the road ahead was still long. She had spent years preparing for this moment, and now that it was here, she felt both victorious and restless. Emily Lane stepped onto the balcony, holding 2 cups of coffee. She offered one to Harper, who accepted it with a small smile. "You should sleep," Emily said softly. Harper shook her head. "Not yet." She sipped the coffee, letting its warmth ground her. Emily leaned on the railing, her face still shadowed with guilt. "I almost cost you everything." Harper turned to her, her voice steady. "They used you, Emily. That's on them, not you." She reached for her sister's hand. "You stood up when it mattered most. That's what I'll remember." Emily blinked away tears. I wanted to protect you." Harper squeezed her hand. "And you did." Logan Pierce and Ethan Cross stood in the safe house's makeshift command center, packing up files and clearing the whiteboards that had been filled with diagrams of Cole's network. "You ever think we'd get this far?" Logan asked, tossing a file into a box. Ethan gave a half smile. "Not in a million years." He glanced at Logan, his voice more serious. "But I'll admit I didn't think we'd walk out of it alive." Logan laughed lightly. "Fair point." A knock at the door caught their attention. Aaron Walker stepped inside, a stack of files in her arms. "You two aren't retiring already, are you?" Logan smirked. "Not a chance." Aaron set the files down. "The feds want every scrap of evidence we have to follow up on the loose ends. Cole's conviction is just the beginning." Ethan's expression darkened. "You think some of his people will try to rebuild?" Aaron nodded. "They'll try. That's why we have to stay one step ahead." Logan's jaw tightened. "Then let's make sure they never get the chance." Meanwhile, across the city, chaos stirred within the remnants of Cole's empire. The network he had built was crumbling, and his former allies scrambled to either save themselves or seize what little power remained. Inside a dimly lit office, Victor Harlan, the enforcer who had ambushed the convoy, paced furiously. His phone buzzed with unanswered calls as news of Cole's conviction spread like wildfire. One of his men entered, hesitant. "Boss, they're rounding everyone up. We need to get out of here." Harlan's fist slammed against the desk. "Not yet." He leaned in close, his eyes wild. "If we're going down, we're taking Lane with us." The man hesitated. The whole city's watching her now. If we go after her… Harlan's lips curled into a twisted smile. Then we make them watch. Later that evening, Harper sat with Logan and Emily in her living room, the calm of the post-trial hours settling in. The TV flickered with news anchors recapping the case, the words, "Justice served," plastered across the screen. "I still can't believe it's over," Emily murmured. Harper's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. She picked it up and frowned. The caller ID was blocked. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" A distorted voice came through the line. "You think you've won, Lane, but the war isn't over." Harper's breath caught. "Who is this?" The voice chuckled darkly. "You'll find out soon enough." The line went dead. Logan leaned forward. "Harper?" She lowered the phone, her face set. "We've got a problem." Within minutes, Harper's team was assembled at the safe house. Avery Dawson's fingers flew across her keyboard as she traced the call. The screen filled with data streams and ping locations. "Got it," Avery said. The call was bounced through a dozen servers, but the origin point was an old factory on the east side of the city. Logan grabbed his jacket. "We're not waiting for them to make the first move." Harper nodded. "Let's end this." The team arrived at the abandoned factory just after midnight. The building was dark, its windows shattered, and the faint smell of rust and dust filled the air. Logan led the way, gun drawn. Harper followed closely, her heart steady. As they entered the main floor, they saw him, Victor Harlan, standing in the center of the room with a smug grin. Surrounding him were several armed men. "Lane," Harlan greeted with mock cheerfulness. "Welcome to your reckoning." Harper stepped forward, unflinching. "You're outnumbered, Harlan. It's over." Harlan's smile twisted. "I don't think so." He raised a detonator, his thumb hovering over the button. Logan shouted, "No!" But Harper held up a hand, her voice calm but lethal. "What's your plan, Harlan? You blow this place up and become another name on the news? Or you walk away and let history forget you ever existed?" Harlan hesitated just long enough. A blur of motion, Ethan tackled him to the ground. The detonator skittered across the floor as the room erupted into chaos. Gunfire rang out as Harlan's men opened fire. Logan and Harper dove for cover behind a metal beam, returning fire with precision. Avery's voice crackled over the comms. "Reinforcements are en route. Hold tight." Ethan wrestled with Harlan, the two men grappling in a brutal fight. Harlan's fist connected with Ethan's jaw, but Ethan retaliated with a sharp elbow strike, knocking Harlan back. Harper saw her opening. She sprinted toward the detonator, grabbing it and disabling it with a quick twist. Logan shouted, "Harper, behind you!" Harper spun just as Harlan lunged at her. She dodged, sending him crashing into a support beam. The structure groaned under the impact, dust raining down as the old factory began to collapse. "Everyone out!" Harper yelled. The team burst out of the factory just as the building caved in with a deafening roar. Harper doubled over, catching her breath as the dust settled around them. Sirens wailed in the distance as reinforcements arrived. Harlan and his men had been subdued, and Cole's empire had finally fallen. Logan clapped Harper on the back. "That's it. It's done." Harper straightened, her gaze calm but fierce. "Not done, but it's a start." Days later, Harper stood at a press conference, flanked by her team. The crowd gathered in the square cheered as she approached the podium. "Justice isn't about winning one battle," Harper said, her voice steady and clear. "It's about standing up for what's right, no matter how hard the fight. This victory belongs to all of us, but the work doesn't end here." Applause echoed through the square as Harper stepped back, her heart steady. Logan leaned in, smiling. "You ready for what's next?" Harper's eyes glinted with quiet determination. "Always." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in hues of gold and crimson, Harper Lane walked along the courthouse steps, pausing to take it all in. The crowds had dispersed, the cameras had stopped flashing, but the impact of what they had accomplished would ripple for years to come. Emily joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee like old times. She handed one to Harper with a smile. "What's next?" Emily asked. Harper took a sip, savoring the calm after the storm. "The next fight. There's always another one." She looked at her sister, her voice soft but resolute. "But this time, we know we're not alone." Logan and Ethan caught up, their familiar banter already filling the air. Avery waved from across the street, her bright smile a reminder of how far they'd all come. The city's skyline glimmered in the fading light, a symbol of hope and resilience. Harper took a deep breath, letting the sense of purpose settle over her like armor. She turned toward the camera crews still lingering nearby and spoke with quiet strength. "To everyone out there who's fighting for the truth, don't give up. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to take the first step. Justice doesn't happen overnight, but when we stand together, nothing can stop us." Thank you for being part of Harper's incredible journey. If you were in her shoes, would you have made the same choices? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Hit that notification bell so you never miss more stories of resilience, courage, and justice. We'll see you next time.